What if the galaxy far, far away was not born in 1977, but had already been mapped decades earlier? Before lightsabers and star destroyers, there were strange, dusty hybrids that fused six-shooters with space helmets. These were the films that dared to imagine cowboys riding comets and outlaws dueling on alien planes. Some bombed, others vanished, but every one of them whispered the DNA of Star Wars. Number 12. The Phantom Planet, 1961. When the Phantom Planet arrived, it was supposed to be another disposable Saturday matinee. Yet beneath the clunky special effects and low-budget charm lay a strange melancholy that set it apart from its contemporaries. Directed by William Marshall, the film begins like a routine space patrol mission and ends as a lonely meditation on sacrifice and belonging. Astronaut Frank Chapman is caught in a meteor storm and crash lands on an asteroid inhabited by tiny humanoid beings called the Retons. Stripped of his normal size, he must adapt to their world, fight their enemies, and eventually defend them against invasion. The narrative plays like a cowboy arriving in a frontier town, protecting settlers from raiders, then riding off into the cosmic sunset. Every scene mirrors the codes of the Western hero's stoicism, honor, self-sacrifice. Chapman becomes a stranger who saves others yet can never stay. Even the design of the asteroid landscape echoes Monument Valley, only made from painted styrofoam and flickering light. Censors were uneasy with its fatalistic tone. Chapman's final decision to return to his giant form and drift alone into the void was viewed as too morbid for a teen audience. Distributors trimmed dialogue and softened the ending in some prints. Critics mocked its slow pacing, but those who looked deeper saw early hints of the mythic loneliness that would define the space epics to come. Years later, the film found new life on late-night television, where it hypnotized viewers with its quiet sadness. The Phantom Planet may have been made with cardboard sets and rubber suits, but its themes of isolation and destiny reached beyond its means. It was the Western spirit staring into infinity, long before Star Wars made space heroic. Number 11. Battle Beyond the Sun, 1962. Roger Corman was never afraid to steal from greatness. When he bought the Soviet film Nebo Zoviot for American release, he handed the project to a young Francis Ford Coppola and told him to make it marketable. The result, Battle Beyond the Sun, was a cinematic hybrid that felt like Buck Rogers crossed with a Cold War showdown and an intergalactic cattle drive. Coppola stripped out Soviet patriotism, replaced names, added monsters, and reshaped the story into a duel between two rival nations racing toward a new planet. Beneath the cheesy dubbing and monster puppets lurked something prophetic. It captured the mythic structure of the American Western, the race for new territory, the rivalry between pioneers, and the moral toll of ambition. The heroes argue not just over science, but over destiny. Their struggle is not just national, but existential. They dream of taming a world that might destroy them. The barren planet surfaces as a reflection of the frontier itself, hostile, beautiful, and unforgiving. Censors at the time disliked its grim tone. They demanded edits to remove imagery of destroyed spacecraft and scenes showing astronauts in despair. Critics called it incoherent and cheap, yet its atmosphere left an imprint. In those awkward edits, one could glimpse the future of mythic sci-fi storytelling, grand ideas expressed through pulp visuals. The film languished in obscurity for decades, until cinephiles rediscovered it as an unintentional masterpiece of recontextualization. Coppola's fingerprints foreshadowed the operatic scale he would later bring to Apocalypse Now. Battle Beyond the Sun remains a fascinating accident, a Western dressed as space propaganda that accidentally invented the rhythm of modern space fantasy. Number 10. Robinson Crusoe on Mars, 1964. Byron Haskin's Robinson Crusoe on Mars dared to mix survival realism with the spiritual tone of the frontier myth. It begins when astronaut Kit Draper crash lands on Mars with only minimal supplies and the vast red desert stretching endlessly around him. There are no aliens, no glamorous battles, only the silence of survival and the weight of human endurance. The film mirrors Daniel Defoe's original story, but trades the ocean for an infinite wasteland. Draper is the quintessential cowboy, lost far from civilization, forging order from chaos. He keeps a log, trains his monkey companion Mona to assist him, and ultimately befriends a fugitive slave from alien invaders, turning the survival tale into an allegory of empathy and liberation. Studio executives were baffled. They expected a children's fantasy, but Haskin delivered an introspective meditation on isolation, faith, and the limits of technology. Some critics called it bleak. Scenes showing Draper's psychological decline were trimmed or softened. Yet what remained was haunting, a visual poem where the vast Martian canyons resemble the cinematic deserts of John Ford and Sergio Leone. Audiences in the 60s were unprepared for its slow pacing, but later generations saw its emotional depth. Directors like Ridley Scott and Duncan Jones have cited it as an influence for its quiet realism. The film's spiritual undertones also foreshadowed Luke Skywalker's longing for adventure and meaning under the twin suns of Tatooine. Rediscovered on home video decades later, Robinson Crusoe on Mars earned cult status as a profound merging of two American myths, the astronaut and the cowboy. Both seek freedom, both face isolation, both find faith among the stars. Number 9. Planet of the Vampires, 1965. When Planet of the Vampires premiered, it was dismissed as another lurid Italian import with flashing lights and melodramatic acting. But Mario Bava's hypnotic direction turned it into something else entirely. It was not just horror, it was a fever dream about explorers haunted by their own ghosts, and it felt more like a ghost town western transplanted into space. The film follows the crew of two spaceships who land on a fog-shrouded planet after receiving a distress signal. One by one, the crew members begin turning against each other, possessed by unseen forces. What unfolds is less an alien invasion and more a tale of frontier madness. The barren planet might as well be a cursed desert. The explorers are outlaws lost in a land that erases their humanity. Bava shot the film on a microscopic budget using colored gels and mirrors to create haunting alien vistas. Critics later realized how much of its DNA seeped into future blockbusters. Ridley Scott's Alien borrowed its tone. John Carpenter's The Thing echoed its paranoia. Even George Lucas admitted that the eerie stillness and pulpy tension of films like this informed the early drafts of Star Wars. Censors were troubled by its hallucinatory visuals and psychological dread. Some territories banned it for being too macabre, while others trimmed entire reels to avoid accusations of occult influence. Audiences in Europe loved it anyway, drawn to its mix of beauty and terror. Today, Planet of the Vampires stands as one of the most atmospheric bridges between gothic horror and space opera. It proved that the void could be haunted and that heroes could die nameless beneath alien skies, just like gunfighters forgotten in the dust. Number 8. Queen of Blood, 1966. Long before Hollywood dared to combine horror with science fiction, Curtis Harrington did it with style and nerve. Queen of Blood took recycled footage from a Soviet space epic and reshaped it into something new, a surreal cosmic western about temptation and doom. Released quietly by American International Pictures, it blurred the line between pulp and prophecy. The story begins when Earth receives a distress call from a crashed alien ship. A rescue crew ventures into space and brings back a green-skinned humanoid woman, the so-called Queen of Blood. At first, she appears calm, mysterious, even divine. Then, she begins draining the life from her rescuers one by one. The final image of blood floating in zero gravity is as poetic as it is horrifying. Underneath the schlock, Harrington infused real emotion. The crew are pioneers undone by curiosity, much like settlers who underestimated a silent frontier. The alien woman is not a monster, but a symbol of obsession and desire, the kind that ruins every conquest. Her shipwreck is a mirror of human ambition turned inward. The film was so cheaply made that critics barely noticed. Yet later scholars pointed out that its structure mirrors every Western siege story, from Stagecoach to Rio Bravo. The crew becomes the besieged fort, the alien, the outlaw circling them under a blood-red sky. Censors disliked its sinister tone and ambiguous morality. Audiences, however, embraced its nightmare imagery when it hit late-night television. Decades later, its DNA appeared again in Alien and Life Force, proving that Queen of Blood had quietly redrawn the boundaries of space adventure. In the end, the Queen's calm face drifting through endless space became an early reflection of what Star Wars would later celebrate, the fear and wonder that lived together beyond the frontier. Number 7. Battle Beneath the Earth, 1967. Before moon bases and Death Stars, there was Battle Beneath the Earth, a bizarre Anglo-American thriller that imagined a secret war fought in the tunnels below the planet. Directed by Montgomery Tully, the film blended Cold War paranoia with pulp Western logic and turned subterranean warfare into a sci-fi shootout straight out of the frontier. The plot follows a U.S. Navy commander who uncovers a network of tunnels dug by an enemy power beneath American soil. Inside these winding caverns are atomic weapons poised to destroy civilization. The heroes descend into the depths, armed like miners and lawmen, confronting outlaws in a new kind of frontier, the Earth itself. What makes the film fascinating is its tone. It feels like a 1950s Western crossed with a nuclear nightmare. Every scene of men crawling through rock faces with flashlights and rifles recalls prospectors hunting bandits. The enemy is unseen, elusive, and mythic. Beneath the pulp thrills lies a parable about fear control and the limits of empire. Censors frowned on its political implications. Some countries accused it of promoting xenophobia, while others saw it as anti-war. MGM barely marketed it, but decades later, film historians recognized it as an uncanny bridge between Cold War thrillers and the moral universe of later sci-fi. The concept of underground lairs and hidden weapon systems even echoed in Star Wars, where entire battles unfolded within mechanical labyrinths. Though nearly forgotten, Battle Beneath the Earth endures as a relic of paranoia turned myth. It captured the essence of the Western hero once more, standing alone with courage in the dark, facing unseen enemies in the heart of the unknown. Number 6. Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, 1969. When Journey to the Far Side of the Sun premiered, audiences expected a flashy British space thriller. What they got instead was a haunting meditation on duality identity and the loneliness of discovery. Directed by Robert Parrish and produced by Jerry Anderson, it carried the polished miniature effects of Thunderbirds, but wrapped them around a cold, cerebral mystery that felt more like a philosophical Western set among the stars. The story follows astronaut Glenn Ross, who is sent to explore a newly discovered planet orbiting exactly opposite Earth on the far side of the sun. When his ship crashes, he awakens believing he has returned home, only to discover a chilling truth. The planet is a mirror Earth where everything is reversed. Even his own reflection becomes alien. This revelation echoes the Western theme of man confronting the frontier and realizing it mirrors his own darkness. Ross is a gunslinger turned explorer, now lost in a cosmic duel with himself. His mission for glory collapses into moral panic and bureaucratic betrayal. It is the frontier myth inverted, man discovering that the real wilderness lies inside. Censors had no reason to ban it, but executives interfered with the ending, forcing a tragic finale. Critics were divided, calling it too slow, too cerebral, too unsettling. Yet later filmmakers, including Christopher Nolan and Duncan Jones, have cited it as an influence for its eerie tone and mirror imagery. Decades later, fans rediscovered it as a visionary precursor to psychological science fiction. It imagined a galaxy where the frontier was no longer physical, but philosophical. Like the great Western heroes before him, Glenn Ross rode alone into the unknown, only to find himself staring back. Number 5. Moon 02, 1969. Hammer Films, known for gothic horror, tried something bold in 1969. They made the first self-proclaimed space western. Moon 02 was part parody, part prediction, and all chaos. Critics mocked it, but beneath its mod-era silliness lay an astonishing attempt to fuse cowboy capitalism with lunar colonization. The story follows Bill Kemp, a washed-up space pilot and prospector who roams the lunar frontier in search of salvage jobs. When he is hired by a ruthless millionaire to capture a valuable asteroid, he becomes the reluctant hero caught between greed and survival. The moon becomes a desert plain, full of miners, claim jumpers, and crooked tycoons. Everything about the film screamed frontier myth. Bar fights and zero-gravity gun duels with mining drills, saloons carved into lunar rock, all captured in lurid technicolor. Yet Hammer's executives were nervous. They feared American audiences would reject a story that mocked both Western and space tropes. The film barely received distribution and quickly vanished from theaters. Still, its aesthetic lived on. Its dusty blue lunar vistas and outlaw imagery inspired set designers for later genre films. Some even believe George Lucas privately screened it as an example of what not to do. but its DNA remains visible in the rough edges of Mos Eisley's cantina and the smugglers of the Outer Rim. For decades, Moon Zero 2 was dismissed as kitsch until cult revivalists embraced it as the first movie brave enough to admit that the final frontier might still belong to drifters and dreamers. It is the story of a man chasing fortune in the void where no law can follow. The West simply moved upward. Number 4. Silent Running, 1972. Douglas Trumbull, the genius visual effects artist behind 2001, A Space Odyssey, decided to direct his own film. The result, Silent Running, was both a lament and a prophecy. On the surface, it was about a lone botanist tending the last surviving forests of Earth aboard space freighters. But beneath the domes and stars, it was a western about one man protecting sacred land against industrial greed. Bruce Dern plays Freeman Lowell, a caretaker who defies orders to destroy the biospheres. When his crewmates attempt to follow commands, he kills them and drifts into isolation with only his robot companions, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. The story unfolds like Shane or High Noon, an individual standing against progress, a guardian of what civilization has forgotten. Censors did not intervene, but studios were nervous about its anti-corporate message and melancholic tone. Audiences expecting another 2001 were instead met with environmental grief and moral despair. Critics were divided. Some called it naive, others called it prophetic. Yet in time, Silent Running became one of the most influential sci-fi films ever made. Its vision of worn-out technology, lonely wanderers, and soulful machines shaped the emotional landscape of Star Wars and countless others. The drones inspired R2-D2. The lonely drifter became the model for Han Solo and every reluctant hero who followed. Trumbull's film ends not with triumph, but with quiet devotion, a robot tending a garden alone among the stars. It is the image of the cowboy who refuses to surrender his land even when the town is gone. A man, a machine, and a fragile dream floating through the emptiness. Number 3. Dark Star, 1974. Before John Carpenter became the master of horror, he made a cosmic comedy that quietly changed science fiction forever. Dark Star began as a student film but grew into a full-length feature, thanks to Carpenter's grit and Dan O'Bannon's script. What started as a joke became the first true anti-Western in space, and the blueprint for the scruffy rebels who would one day pilot the Millennium Falcon. The story follows a crew of burned-out astronauts drifting through deep space on a mission to destroy unstable planets. Their ship is dirty, their uniforms are worn, and their spirits are crushed. Instead of noble explorers, they are tired prospectors of the void blowing up worlds for a paycheck. The film's humor hides its melancholy. These men have become ghosts of their own mission. One of them keeps a pet alien that looks like a beach ball, another argues philosophy with a malfunctioning bomb. Yet beneath the absurdity lies an aching loneliness. The emptiness of space becomes the new desert, a frontier without reward. Their final act, a man surfing into a fiery atmosphere, turns the cowboy's ride into the sunset, into a literal descent into oblivion. Censors ignored it because they did not understand it. Studios dismissed it as too weird, but George Lucas and Ridley Scott both noticed. O'Bannon would later write Alien using many of the same ideas. Blue-collar workers trapped in space facing existential dread. Dark Star's low-rent universe made sci-fi human again and paved the way for the rough, lived-in galaxy of Star Wars. Dark Star proved that the future would not be shiny or clean. It would be full of dust, boredom, and quiet heroism, just like the West had always been. Number 2. Zardoz, 1974. When John Boorman released Zardoz, it baffled critics and audiences alike. Starring Sean Connery in a bizarre costume and set in a decaying future, it was marketed as a psychedelic nightmare, but beneath the madness lay a startlingly spiritual western about power decay and the illusion of immortality. The world of Zardoz is split between two civilizations, the brutal exterminators who live in chaos, and the immortal Eternals who live in sterile utopia. Connery's character Zed is both savage and seeker. He rides into their hidden valley like a gunslinger entering a corrupt town only to expose its rot from within. The crystal godhead that speaks to him is a totem of manipulation and deceit. Borman envisioned the film as a mythic fable where man confronts his gods just as cowboys once confronted their lawless frontiers. Every frame drips with allegory: the dust, the decay, the struggle between nature and control. Though critics laughed at its costumes, they missed its philosophical scope. It asked the same questions Star Wars would later explore. Who are the chosen? What is faith? And what happens when the myth breaks? Censors hesitated over its surrealism and strange imagery. Some territories cut scenes they deemed sacrilegious. Connery himself called it the boldest risk of his career. The film bombed but refused to die. With time, it became a cult cornerstone. Its imagery echoed in everything from Dune to The Matrix. Zardoz was more than an oddity. It was a vision of the West turned inward. A story of man challenging heaven itself, riding through the ruins of civilization armed with nothing but curiosity and rebellion. Number 1. Star Crash, 1978. When Luigi Cozzi's Star Crash hit theaters, it was labeled an Italian ripoff of Star Wars. Yet those who look closer see it as the final missing link, the last echo of the space western experiments that built the galaxy far, far away. Star Crash follows the outlaw smuggler Stella Star, who roams the cosmos with her loyal companion Acton. Together, they are hired to locate a secret weapon and rescue a prince from the evil Count Zarth Arn. Every frame bursts with neon light foam planets and swashbuckling melodrama. It is campy and chaotic, yet strangely sincere. Cozzi admitted he wanted to merge Flash Gordon with the morality of spaghetti westerns. Stella is the gunslinger who defies authority. The villain is the tyrant sheriff ruling from his fortress. The showdown is not a dogfight, but a mythic duel of wills. Behind the scenes, the production was a mess. The studio rushed it to cash in on Lucas's success, but Cozzi shot it with more heart than resources. Critics mocked its effects, but praised its imagination. In France, it was hailed as space baroque. In the years since, Star Crash has become a cult legend beloved for its fearless sincerity. Where other films sought realism, Star Crash sought wonder. Its heroes fight not for destiny, but for freedom itself, the same impulse that drives every frontier story. It closed the loop on a cinematic experiment that began with dusty asteroids and lonely explorers. Before lightsabers, there were ray guns. Before Jedi, there were wanderers like Stella Star. Star Crash was the final hymn of the space western age before the galaxy found its new messiah in Star Wars. These 12 films built the skeleton of a myth long before Star Wars gave it a name. They dreamed of deserts that floated in the stars and cowboys who rode rockets instead of horses. Each one dared to merge wonder with weariness, faith with frontier. Which of these forgotten experiments do you think deserves revival? Tell us below. And join us for more journeys through lost cinematic galaxies. Like, share, and subscribe to keep the legends alive.